Hello, everyone. The webcast will begin shortly. We'll just give another minute to allow people to dial in. So, yeah, we will be back with you shortly. Okay, I think we can start now. Welcome to the webinar, everyone. My name is Dongsun Choi. I am a senior analyst with Refinitiv Ag Research. So for the next 45 minutes, we will be discussing Argentina corn and soybean outlooks for the new season. There's a lot going on in Argentina at the moment, as you very much know, in terms of the economy and politics, lots of changes. We are all interested in how those changes are influencing the supply side market dynamics. So that will be the main focus of discussion today. Before we begin, just a quick note that this webcast is going to be a little different than like a traditional webinar format-wise, in a sense that we will go straight into the questions that have been carefully pre-selected, and those questions will be answered by our panel of experts. We have some great speakers today. Let me introduce them to you. First of all, Esteban Julian Copati. Esteban is the head of the Agricultural Estimation Department at the Buenos Aires Grain Exchange. He is responsible for writing and publishing reports that have essentially become a local and international benchmark. He has also been actively involved in various satellite imagery analysis projects, working with researchers and scientists at the University of Maryland in the US. He is a member of NASA Harvest and GeoGlam Crop Monitor Report. Also joining us is Agustin Tejeda Rodriguez, Chief Economist at the Buenos Aires Grain Exchange. He is in charge of the Department of Economics and the Department of Agricultural Estimates. He is an external consultant at many different international organizations, including United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, and International Center for Trade and Sustainable Development. Mr. Tejeda is also a professor at University of Belgrano, and today he's going to bring an economic perspective to our discussion. So we have a lot to cover today. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Well, why don't you start with the state of Argentina's economy? First of all, I have to mention the massive debt forgiveness that Argentina got recently. As you may well know, the private creditors of Argentina have reached an agreement with the Argentinian government about a month ago to basically cut its debt in half. Roughly 45% of the loan was forgiven. So that was a pretty big deal, I think. It must have been a huge relief, which I think could be one reason how the Argentinian government was able to afford the recent tax cuts. They made an announcement a couple of weeks ago that it'll cut export taxes on various industrial, mining, and agricultural products to encourage trade. For example, soy is to be reduced from the previous 33% to 30% for the rest of the year. But apparently, many farmers are not finding it enough. I heard like strikes and protests are still going on because they believe the real benefit of the tax reduction will never reach the farm. In their thinking, most of the benefits will go to the crushers and the processors, not the producers who actually plant and produce the crop. As far as I know, that's the stance of the main farm association right now. But there seems to be more to that. Apparently, the export tax cut was also a result of a concern over the lack of dollars, because exporting is such an important way to gain dollars. I heard people in Argentina are finding it almost impossible to purchase dollars right now because of the currency control, the currency restrictions that took place a few weeks ago. The reason being that people have been buying dollars frantically at a record pace as the peso loses value every day. So the government had to step in and intervene to protect the domestic currency by limiting access to dollars. But of course, unfortunately, that also means a surge of the black market, all the illegal transactions, which I think could be another big challenge in Argentine economy at the moment. Well, Esteban, I just brought up some talking points and sort of gave my own answer to this first question. But, you may think differently. Obviously, this is a very broad question. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges in Argentine economy at the moment?
Okay, thanks, Don. Thanks for such a nice introduction. First of all, I would like to thank you to thank all the Refinitiv team for inviting us to participate in this webinar. For us, it's very good to participate in this webinar. Regarding your first question, I will focus my answer in the terms of the agricultural sector. So let's see how the main factors of uncertainty we are facing affect agricultural margins and farmer incentives. According to the methodology developed by the Buenos Aires Grain Exchange, average harvest grain prices during the last pre-sowing period, that means July to September, experienced a decrease compared to the previous season. However, this price decrease is partially compensated by a drop in production costs, which was caused by a reduction in price of inputs such as fertilizers, fuels, and phytosanitary products. And this was especially the case for grains that require greater technological investments, such as corn, for example, which is one of the main crop we produce in Argentina. Under this scenario, on a national scale, gross margin for the 2021 crop season would be below those recorded for the previous season, with the exception of sunflower, which will show an improvement due to the improvement in its price. The fall in the farm revenue, which would be due to lower harvest prices and especially to lower yields, is estimated to be significant than the fall in costs. It is, though, the lower yields would be a consequence of an adverse climate scenario. In this case, margin could be even lower if drought conditions deepen. On a regional level, corn continues to be the most profitable crop in the most productive regions of the country. Soybeans continue to be the best option in northern and western regions, which have more restrictive environment and lower potential yields, as well as higher transportation costs due to their distance from the ports. This is the scenario we are analyzing for the agricultural sector right now.
All right, thanks, Esteban. I think that's really helpful to understand, what's really going on in Argentina. Agustin, so the same question to you, and could you also address the next two questions altogether? I think you are the right person here who can give us the best answer to these follow-up questions. How do you see the situation in Argentina's farmer selling? And given the dynamics in that, what do you think is expected for soybean crushing and exports?
Yeah, thanks, Don, for the introduction and the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here sharing this webinar with you. And regarding your first question and analyzing what is behind the margins presented recently by Esteban, as we all know, the new crop season, the 2020-21 crop season will take place in a setting characterized by a great sources of uncertainty stemming from both international and domestic factors. Regarding the internationals, I will only mention that the coronavirus and the measures that countries are adopting to contain it, the trade war, and also the African swine fever produce disruptive effects on market prices, which have a unique dynamic this year. But beyond this complex international situation, as you said, in the case of Argentina, it is domestic factors that have the greatest impact on farming decisions. Specifically, the situation of our economy and the constant changes in agricultural policies, as you said. Argentina will be one of the countries most severely affected by the world economic crisis, with an estimated drop in its GDP of 12%, making this crisis even worse than the crash of 2002. Although it has been declared essential and was not affected by a severe quarantine, the agribusiness sector will not be the exception, with a drop of 6% in 2020, this year. So the weakness of the Argentinian macroeconomy and the measures that the government is adopting to overcome the crisis are having a negative impact on planting, investment, and marketing decisions. I would like to stress only two of those measures, agreeing with you, Don. The first one, the tightening of the currency market controls that had resulted in a gap of more than 100% between the official and the black market exchange rates, and recently increases in export duties. New duties have been set right now at 33% for soybeans and 12% for cereal. The main problem with these measures is that they increase the gap between what producers receive for their product and what they should receive at international prices. As you all know, Argentina already has the most hostile agricultural policy in the world, according to OECD data. And this year, with these measures, our policy will be even more negative to farmer incentives. And so, according to our estimate, planted area and investment in technology would be higher if those measures wouldn't exist this new crop season. Regarding the second question about the farmer selling pace, we are seeing in Argentina, we have to mention that has had a particular dynamic during the 2019-2020 crop season, affected by these changes in export duties and the return of the exchange rate gap. After the primary election in August last year, when chances of a victory for Fernandez had increased significantly, expectations of an increase in export duties rose considerably. So the market began to anticipate a new increase in export taxes, and farmers started to modify their planting decisions and sale decisions. Therefore, we experienced a huge increase in the farmer selling pace, with most of the crop being sold by December 2019. In 2020, we are in the opposite situation. We are seeing a big deceleration in farmer sales. Of course, we expected this to be the case for the first months of the year because production had been sold in advance. But the slowdown continued, at least for soybeans, and right now we have a smaller percentage of the harvest sold as compared to last season. Also, it's very important to know that a large percentage of sales that have already been made by farmers don't have a fixed price yet. And this percentage is also higher than it was last season. We expect that under the scenario we are facing, this situation will continue in the following months. Although they are going in the right direction, the measures you mentioned that were recently taken by the government, this temporary decrease of 3% in export tax for the next 3 months, won't have the expected impact. The problem is that at the same time, the exchange rate gap has kept on growing, and also the valuation expectations are bigger after recent announcement by the central bank. Thus, the gap between the dollars that our farmers receive for their sales and the dollars that they would receive if those controls weren't exist is increasing significantly also after the latest decisions adopted by the government. And we also see that this acceleration in the farmer selling is going on also for the new crop season, the 2020-21 crop season. Lastly here, I would like to mention that one lesson that we can learn from this situation in terms of ag policy is that you don't need to adopt a measure to have an impact on planted area and farmer sales. Just the expectation that the measure could be adopted will have an impact on farmer decisions. And the third question about the dynamic and the impact of this dynamic on soybean crushing and exports, let me say that this slowdown is affecting the rest of the links in their industrial value chain, especially export and soybean crushing. Grain exports have done well this year, with increases of 22% between January and August, but now they seem to be reaching their limits. For the entire 2019-2020 crop season, we are at the grain exchange expecting export of 37 million tons of corn, 7.5 million tons of soybeans, and 12.2 million tons of wheat. The soybean crushing industry, which is considered one of the most competitive industries in Argentina and is responsible for 30% of total Argentinian export, is the industry most affected by the situation described above. During the first months of the current season, Argentina crushed around 18.2 million tons of soybeans, close to the minimum of the last 8 seasons. And as for today, it's reporting a decrease of 12% compared to the same period of the past crop season, the 2018-2019 crop season. For the entire current crop season, the 2019-2020, we are estimating a crushing of 39 million tons. Consequently, meal exports will experience a significant decrease. Argentina is the top exporter of soybean meal exports in the world. Under this scenario, lastly, we will end the season with larger ending stock totaling more than 8.5 million tons of soybean, which could compensate the lower production we are expecting for the coming season. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Agustin, for your insight and perspective. I think what you just discussed is something we rarely talk about here, despite its importance, because we tend to only focus on the production side of things. So yeah, thanks again for your valuable input. I think this is a good time to bring up probably what all of us are most interested in. Let's talk about corn and soy acreage. Well, in Argentina, every year, corn and soybeans compete for acres, although their planting periods do not exactly overlap. We want to know if there will be any significant acreage shift this season. Let me first start with our perspective on this, and then I will turn it over to Esteban and Agustin. Well, I think there should be at least some acreage shift this season. I mean, acreage is a function of a lot of things, but if you think about the expected profitability, you'd have to give a slight edge to soybeans. For example, if you look at the production cost, it seems to be increasing despite low oil prices amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The thing is that this is especially the case for corn and soybeans, because in Argentina, corn typically has a higher cost of production than soy, mainly due to larger fertilizer costs. Although, as Esteban just pointed out, this might not be the case, but, corn is simply more expensive to plant than soybeans. And, corn farmers tend to get hit harder by the fuel cost increase than soybean farmers do. Well, looking at the other side of the equation, it seems that prices are in soybean farmers' favor as well. I mean, obviously, both corn and soybean prices have been largely above last year's levels, but I think soybean price rally is having more impressive. Now, obviously, there are many other variables that come into play other than price and cost. First thing that comes to mind is the dryness. It's been very dry in Argentina, especially the central and northwestern parts of the Pampas. Well, we'll come back to this in a few minutes, but the point I'm trying to make here is that corn might be a safer option, like a less risky option for Argentine farmers when it's dry, because corn tends to be more sensitive to dry conditions than soybeans. I mean, physiologically speaking, remember those farmers who have dealt with larger-scale droughts in recent years, such as the one during the 2017-18 season, for example, they do not want to take the risk. I don't think they will stick with corn. The last thing I want to mention is the tax rates, the export tax rates. Soy will be reduced from 33% to 30%. Again, you could say that the tax cut is pretty small, not enough to impact anything significantly at this point, and it's temporary anyway. But it shouldn't hurt. If anything, it should only help making soy a more attractive option. So that's how we see it. Esteban, as far as I know, you do not expect too much acreage shift this season. Correct me if I'm wrong, but would you like to present a different view, or do you largely agree with our position?
Yes, of course, Don, and you are right. We are not expected to see a significant area switching from corn to soybean this season, as we would have 10 years ago when soybean prices and the local regulatory scheme fueled the move from corn to soybean. For this season, we are expected a slight drop in corn planted area of just 200,000 hectares. This area will be used to grow soybean crops and will be located mainly in regions where we expect La Niña scenario to have the greatest impact. Apparently, this will be happening in the central area of our ag region, where the core agricultural area is located. In these regions, despite the favorable economic condition for corn during the pre-sowing period, the investment cost of corn is higher than that of soybean, and consequently, the economic risk entailed by La Niña scenario is higher too. At the same time, in the rest of our ag region, we are where the impact of La Niña will be less intense. We are expecting corn area to switch from early to late sowing dates, with the aim of minimizing the risk of experiencing a dry scenario for corn. Early planting dates make it so the critical stage of corn occurs in December, when we will still be under the influence of La Niña scenario. Remember that La Niña event is forecasted from October to December this season. Meanwhile, the late planting dates make it so that its critical stage occurs from February onwards, with a higher probability of rains and a better chance that they will reach the harvest period in good condition. At the same time, delaying the corn sowing dates prolongs the fallow period of the plots, increasing their chances of accumulating more water deep in the soil, and thus having better subsurface soil moisture condition for the crop cycle. Finally, this change in the planting date has become a common management technique in marginal regions where potential yields are limited by soil quality and more unstable weather than what we see in our core area. So we as you say before, we are not expecting a big change, a big transfer of area between corn to soybean, but we are registering the planting decision of our producer. They are switching from early planting dates to late planting dates in terms of corn production in Argentina.
Yep. Thanks again, Esteban, for laying out your perspective. It was really interesting to hear. Agustin, could you add some color to that? How do you think farmers are going to make their planting decisions this season?
Yeah, thank you, Don. Complementing Esteban's answer, I would like to take this question to provide some context to help you better understand acreage shift between cereals and soybean in Argentina. At this point, it's important to know that during the last 18 crop season, variation in planted area have been affected by changes in ag policies. Between 2002 and 2015, soybean planted area registered a significant increase, while the area planted with cereals remained basically stable. After that, these trends would become totally reversed. Corn and wheat planted area grew at a rate of 15% per year between 2015 and 2019, while soybean planted area registered a decrease of around 5% annually. For the first time in the last 23 years, during the 2019-2020 crop season, corn production in Argentina was higher than soybean production. Behind those trends are changes in export taxes and export restrictions. Remember, the main effect of an export tax is to a decrease in the domestic price that in percentage terms matches the duty. So in Argentina, the domestic price of the grain is well below the international ones. A lower price and as a result, a lower margin for the product are the direct consequences of the export tax. But as we have different duties for different products, we also have indirect effects, depending on how duties affect comparative margin between crops. During the first period I mentioned, between 2002 and 2015, cereals were affected by high export taxes, but also by export restrictions. So compared with soybeans, cereals were subject to higher discounts on domestic prices. After 2015, the situation changed, and the reduction in export taxes and the elimination of export restrictions favored cereals planted. Therefore, we saw a significant increase in the area allocated to corn and wheat. The latest measures taken last December and last March raised taxes again, as we commented before, to 33% on soybeans and 12% on the grains, furthering this recent trend, putting soybeans at a more of a disadvantage, and that is behind the movement that we are seeing right now. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Agustin. I think it definitely makes sense. Now, what about the planting pace? Well, in Argentina, early corn is normally planted in September through October, and the later corn is usually planted in December through January. Some farmers, especially in Santa Fe and Entre Rios, they do not plant in November because they want to avoid pollination in January, the hottest time of the year. I would say roughly 40% of the corn is planted during the first phase. As for soybeans, well, first crop soybean planting typically starts in late October. Roughly 80% of the total crop is planted then. And then there is a small amount of the second crop soybeans that are planted after wheat is harvested. Now, I would say you kind of touched on this a little bit, but there has been some speculation that if the dryness continues, some farmers might put plantings on hold and wait until later corn planting begins in December, or just switch to soybeans that are less risky compared to corn. Well, I think it's possible, but honestly, it's very hard to gauge how farmers are going to really react. It's always tricky, but at least there are no significant delays in planting so far. Corn is about 30% complete as of last week. I would say as far as planting pace and sequence, no drastic changes or delays are expected. Argentina is about to finally get some widespread precipitation starting today, actually. So that should alleviate some of the dryness there, although it might not be enough. But like I just mentioned, if dryness returns, then anything can happen, I think. But Esteban, do you think any differently about this?
No, Don, I think that our main concern right now is related to La Niña scenario, no, during the main part of summer corn planting period, no. We already mentioned that. In terms of corn, we recently registered some showers in our belt area. These showers will allow producers to achieve their planting goals for early planted corn in our belt region. That planting windows of the planting window of this corn ends during the first day of November. So we still have 10 days in which to complete this work in the fields. After that, we will need to keep receiving rains in November and December in order to maintain the soil moisture condition at favorable levels during the remaining planted windows. We are also concerned about the soybean as second crop area because second crop plots require more rains in comparison with soybean as first crop plots. And also, it is important to keep an eye on temperatures. The higher the temperatures, the higher the evapotranspiration and rains requirements. This is also important. Something that I would like to highlight is our concern on soybean as second crop in the center of the crop area, where weather models shows that La Niña will have the greater impacts. It is important to mention that soybean as second crop need more rains than soybean as first crop, and this is due to the water consumption of the crop that grew and was harvested before the planting of soybean as second crop. These plots need extra rains, which might not arrive this season. No, so we have to wait and see what La Nina bring us during the next month. Thanks, Don.
Thanks, Esteban. Very, very useful information. I think what you said totally makes sense. Agustin, could you let us know how you see it?
Yeah, sure,
Agustin,
Don.
are you there?
Yeah, I am here. Sorry, I was mute. First, let me add some comment to the previous question about what factor could influence an expansional contraction at this moment of the planting window. I think that from an economic point of view, there are three factors that could influence planting decisions right now. However, we have to take into account this, that as we are in the middle of the planting window, most decisions have already been taken and can be modified. But we have three factors. The first one, prices. As I mentioned before, we have seen some unique pricing dynamics this year influenced by international sources of uncertainty after a significant decline in the first half of the year as a result of quarantine measures. In the last 2 months, we have seen a significant recovery. The growth in Chinese demand, a weaker dollar, and lower than expected harvest are behind this movement. So if we register an improvement in weather conditions, actually, I am in La Pampa right now, in La Pampa province, and it is raining. These better prices could affect planting decisions, especially in those regions farther away from the ports. The second factor that works in an opposite direction is the possibility of a new increase in export taxes. We have to bear in mind that thanks to the emergency law passed last December, the government has the right to raise export taxes again by 3 percentage points without congressional authorization, although only for cereals, because the tax on soybeans is already at the maximum level allowed by the law. Therefore, expectation of a new increase could discourage corn planting. However, I think that it's important to mention that this scenario isn't likely to happen at the moment. And finally, the third sector is related to the recent re-adoption of the 2% export tax differential between soybeans and its byproducts. This decision could encourage soybean crushing, resulting in better prices for soybean producers. And regarding this question about the concerns on the planting pace or sequence this season, one of our biggest concerns is that a more significant switch from early to late corn will lead to a delay in corn exports. So export will become concentrated in the months of July and August, outside the most favorable marketing window for Argentina, which is between the months of March and May. In this sense, during the second half of the year, Argentina faces a tougher scenario, as it would compete with the US, Brazil, and Ukraine, which may result in lower fall prices. In addition, under this scenario, our logistics would be challenged because the bulk of the soybean and corn harvest will take place during the same period of the year. And lastly, for soybean, our main concern is that the crushing's a delay in the planting, our main concern is that the crushing sector will depend to an increased extent on import from Paraguay during the first month of the season, and this situation could affect crushing margins. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Agustin. This is really, really helpful. Now, switching gears, let's talk about the weather side of things. Again, we kind of already touched on this, but let's take a deep dive into it. Well, thinking about the next few months, I think most weather forecasting agencies now agree that the current La Nina phase will continue. It may start to weaken into early next year, but I think at this point, it's safe to say that there is a high chance we'll see a La Nina event this winter. Which brings us to the following question. how much impact will La Nina have on the corn and soy crop development this season? Well, let me just quickly summarize our view on this, and then I will let Esteban and Agustin take over. Well, first of all, as you may well know, La Nina conditions are often associated with hot and dry weather in the main Pampas region. Last time it showed up was during the infamous 2017-18 season. We saw historically low yield and production numbers at that time. Well, this year, some areas of the central and northwestern Pampas have been going through very severe drought. Soil moisture levels are very low in those areas right now, despite occasional precipitation like here and there over the last couple of weeks. With that said, the weather outlook through February does not look very pessimistic. La Nina will not likely get any stronger from this point on. If anything, it should get weaker. It's not gonna completely dissipate by early next year, but likely to gradually lose its intensity, according to our analysis. The central and northwestern crop regions are expected to finally get some ample precipitation. That's definitely going to be beneficial. Some of the southeastern regions, like southern Buenos Aires, will see some dryness during the early growing season. But the soil moisture conditions there are very healthy right now, unlike the northwestern counterpart. So, yeah, the crops there should be able to endure some degree of dryness. So overall, I wouldn't worry too much about it, although, obviously things can change anytime. So I wouldn't take my eyes off of it. Esteban, what's your take on this? Do you think the La Nina impact will be significant?
I think that in order to mitigate the impact of La Nina, as I told you before, our producers are diversifying the planting date of corn, for example. They are switching from early to late planted dates. We expect the peak of La Nina, as you told us before, we are expecting the peak of La Nina even to occur during the next month. That means less rain and higher temperature as we approach summer at the end of December. Having said this, early corn and first crop soybean will undergo much of their development in restricted environments, and this could limit the growth and development of the crops, increasing the risk of area loss and lowering potential yields. Under this scenario, we are projecting a year-over-year reduction in soybean and corn production. On the other hand, it is not clear yet when the La Nina scenario will come to an end. If this scenario continues into the coming year, its negative impact on crop development would be greater than expected because the reproductive stages for soybeans and late planted corn take place from February onwards. So we have to keep an eye on long-term forecasts because main part of our production will be defined from February onwards during the next year. So that will be the critical stage in order to adjust our production projection for this season. This is these are my views, Don.
Thanks, Esteban. Agustin, do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, again, allow me to give an economic point of view here, analyzing the possibility of a more severe weather scenario for Argentina's grain production and its consequence, its possible effects on the agro-industrial sector contribution to the Argentinian economy. According to our estimate and using computable models, in an extreme scenario, such as a drought similar to the one that we saw during 2017-18 crop season, total grain production could decrease by 20-25%. This reduction in grain production would decrease the contribution of the agro-industrial sector to the Argentinian economy by 10% as compared to our current baseline scenario. And note that the estimated reduction in quantity would be compensated for by an increase in fall prices. On the other hand, also, export will be reduced by 10% under this extreme weather scenario. As a result, during the next year, with fewer export coming from the ag sector, the most important one in terms of total exports, the normalization of the Argentinian economy, I mean, in particular, the elimination of currency controls will be made very, very difficult. And lastly, let me point out, as Esteban just said, that the likelihood that such an extreme scenario could occur in terms of production is thought to have reduced by advances made in ag technology. During the last few crop seasons, we have seen an increase in the use of cutting-edge technologies, with better technological packages being adopted by farmers in Argentina. I am referring to more and better inputs, as well as management innovations such as late corn. So these improvements make our production system more resilient to an adverse drought scenario. Thank you, Don.
Thanks, Agustin. Let's move on to the next question. So this is just a small supplementary question. Well, I have to say, Cordoba is at the biggest risk given our forecast in terms of the yield and production potential, even with a rather optimistic outlook through February. The fact of the matter is that Cordoba is the number one, it's the top corn producing province in Argentina, and the second biggest producer of soybeans, arguably the most important crop region in Argentina, and yet it has not received any meaningful above normal precipitation since like May. It's also pretty much the only major crop region with a planting delay at the moment. For example, corn is behind like 5% compared to last season in Cordoba. I know it's not much, not really a significant delay yet, but plantings are well on schedule in all other major crop regions except in Cordoba. So I think it's pretty telling. Esteban, what are your thoughts on this? Which major production regions do you think are at the biggest risk given your forecast?
I totally agree with you, Don. I think the Cordoba province is our main concern, no, under this La Niña scenario. As I said before, the highest risk can be found in the western area of our ag region. That means the provinces of Córdoba, La Pampa, San Luis, and sectors of western Buenos Aires would be affected by drought during the next month. But before stepping into this answer, going deep in this answer, I would like to tell you that we registered showers yesterday that improved the surface soil moisture condition in main part of Córdoba, La Pampa, large areas in Buenos Aires and Santa Fe province, and there are some forecasts for the following days too. So we have to wait and see what the climate brings in terms of rains to those areas. At the same time, we are also expecting dry condition in sectors of central and south of Santa Fe province, which is Argentina's core productive area. All these regions, talking about Córdoba, La Pampa, San Luis, and Santa Fe provinces, all these regions taken together make up more than 35% of the country's planted area. This means that 1 in 3 hectares could be affected by La Niña climate scenario this season. This is what we are expecting for this season, Don. Thank you.
Thanks, Esteban. Agustin, the same question to you. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, we like to add here that in addition to the previously mentioned impacts on the national numbers, a more adverse weather scenario will also have consequences on regional balance sheets and basis also. Those regions which were mentioned by you and Esteban, are very important, not only in terms of grain production, but also in terms of domestic consumption, especially Córdoba, Santa Fe, and Entre Rios, which are important centers for the production of meat and dairy products. Córdoba, which is a major ethanol producer, and the Buenos Aires province also, which produce large quantities of other wheat and corn products. Thank you.
Thanks, Agustin. Very well. I think this is a good time to share our current AYP numbers. I know it's still early in the season, but just get a sense of where each of us stands. Well, I guess I can go first. Well, we have corn at 45.6 million tons. That's our current median production estimate, with a range of 41.4 to 49.8. And that's based on planted area of 6.4 million hectares. We are at 49.7 million tons for soybeans, and the estimates range from 44.7 to 54.6. We have soybean planted area at 17.8 million hectares. Speaking of that, I think the USDA's corn estimates are way too high. They have 50 for corn and 53.5 for soybeans. In fact, their corn estimate is not even within our range. So yeah, I mean, again, it's still early to tell, but I don't think Argentina will produce more than 50 million tons of commercial corn this season. Having said that, we all know, yield expectations can change considerably once the growing season starts. So, yeah, obviously we'll need to wait and see how the weather is really going to play. Esteban and Agustin, your estimates certainly get a lot of attention. Could you please share your latest numbers?
Yes, of course. For corn, we are projecting a planted area at 6.3 million hectares and a harvestable area slightly above 6.1 million hectares. The yield on national scale is projected at 7.7 tons per hectare, and that means the production would reach 45 million tons this year, what represent a year-over-year fall by 8.7%. In terms of soybean, the soybean planted area is projected at 17.2 million hectares, reflecting a year-over-year expansion of 0.6%. The harvestable area is projected at 16.7 million hectares, and the yield on a national scale is projected at slightly below 2.8 tons per hectare. Finally, the production is expected to reach 46.5 million tons, below the scenario of the USDA, and that's because we are expecting this season, as I told you before, we are expecting to transfer more area to late days in terms of corn, and that will impact into the potential yield of the crop. Late planted corn has less yield potential in comparison to the early planted corn, and that will affect, and that's plus the reduction on planted area we are expecting this season is going to affect the final production. In terms of soybean, the main concern is about the weather condition that we are going to face during the following month. So that will not only affect the acreage of the crop, but also the yield, during the next harvest period. So these are the numbers we are projecting from the Buenos Aires Grain Exchange for this season, though.
Yeah, complementing these numbers with our estimate for the rest of the variables in place during the new crop season. For wheat, we are estimating 1 million of 6.2 million tons and exports of 11.2 million tons, 1 million less compared with the previous crop season. In corn, exports are estimated to reach 33 million tons, a decrease of 4 million tons from our 2019-2020 estimates. In the case of soybeans, crushing is estimated to reach 40 million tons, far from the 45 million ton record achieved during the 2014-2015 crop season. Exports of soybean will be at around 7 million tons in the following year. As you may notice, all of the variables are estimated at lower level for the next crop season due to the expected drop in grain production levels. In the case of soybeans, part of the fall in production will be compensated by higher beginning stocks. With level of production, finally crushing and exports, the contribution of the agro-industrial sector to the Argentinian economy will be lower during 2021. To put this in perspective, if we add the estimated recession for 2020, we will be seeing a fall in the agricultural GDP for the second year in a row. Thus, we can conclude that the sector is showing signs of stagnation due to mainly the rollback in ag policy decisions after had experienced a period of growth between 2015 and 2019, and that was under a better policy framework. Thank you.
Very well. Thanks for sharing your numbers, Esteban and Agustin. I'm sure our listeners have found them very useful. Okay, so I think we'll have to wrap up here. Thank you, everyone. I think I learned a lot myself today. I hope all of you feel the same way. My special thanks go to Esteban and Agustin, of course. We really appreciate your time joining us today. And thank you for your really valuable insights and perspectives. Our next webinar on Argentina crops will likely be in early March. We do that every year around that time. And we're going to be doing it in more like a traditional way with a formal presentation. There are going to be a PowerPoint slide with many interesting figures and, of course, more in-depth analysis. So hopefully I'll see you then. I'm looking forward to it. Okay, so thank you, everyone, and stay safe. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for all